Brian Thomas Jr., LSU wide receiver, 6'2" and 7/8 inches, 209 pounds, 9 3/4 inch hands, 32 3/4 inch arms, 79 5/8 inch wingspan. He is 21. He'll be 22 in October. He ran a 4.33 in the 40 with a 1.50 10-yard split. He had a 126-inch broad jump, 11 bench press reps, 38.5-inch vertical. Last year in 13 games, he had 68 receptions, 1,177 yards receiving, 17 touchdowns. He had a rush attempt per -6 yards.
And those 17 touchdowns led all college football.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah, so Brian Thomas Jr., fantastic season with LSU. Obviously, he was the most people consider him the Robin to the Batman, which was Malik Neighbors. But we've seen a history of LSU receivers pairing up together, playing really well. We've got that again this year. Both of these guys had fantastic seasons. Brian Thomas, a guy that really was a big deep threat, took the top off the defense often. He is a guy that, as far as like his release, I think he does a really good job of getting off the ball. Yep. Pretty solid catch radius. And obviously, you heard those combine numbers. As far as an athlete, I mean, the guy can burn at that size. So when you have that size-speed combo, that's a pretty lethal combination. And so far, because of all of these things, he's being talked about in the conversation of a top 20 pick in the NFL draft this year. Going through all of the tape, I'll say I don't necessarily see the hype that's been building with Brian Thomas. And look, I get it. We listed all of these really good things about Brian Thomas.
Yep.
But when I look at some of his movement patterns, I think he's a little bit stiff. He doesn't run a super diverse route tree. And
Agreed.
when you see him run other routes, there's a few routes that he runs decently, but there's a lot of routes where he just doesn't look overly comfortable running these routes. He was also a player that basically produced nothing for most of his career up until this season and then just blew up, which is always interesting. There's guys that do that and work out great. There's plenty of guys that do that, and it was a one-year wonder kind of thing. So for me, when I kind of brought everything together, I felt very meh about Brian Thomas. I don't think he's a bad player. I think he's a good player, but I don't think he's worth the hype that I've been kind of garnering and hearing about Brian Thomas. I think he's a vertical threat that will do a good job of stretching the defense and making some big plays downfield, but he's not going to do a lot after the catch. He's not going to be much of a possession guy.
Right.
I think he's a fairly one-dimensional player, which seems a little risky for me if I'm an NFL team taking a guy like that highly.
Yeah. Unfortunately, NFL teams do that sometimes.
They do.
I mean, Justin Ross, for instance, is a guy that was very one-dimensional, just a speed guy, ended up going first round. So it can happen. And
not Justin Ross.
John Ross.
John Ross.
John Ross.
Yeah, they went 7 overall to Bengals.
I was like, wait, that's close. But
Sorry.
Yeah.
My bad. But yeah, like you said, his route running leaves a lot to be desired. I think he does have some movement skills to improve that. I don't see him quite maybe as stiff as you see him.
I don't see that.
But it's not there. He has a long way to go as far as developing that. For a big guy, I didn't really love him in some contested catch it type of scenarios. I thought
very average there.
I thought kind of his hands fell off a bit there. I think he can make all the normal catches that you want a guy to make, but for a guy that's almost 6'3", 209 pounds, and he scored a ton of touchdowns, I would like him to have an above the rim element to his game. So
Quentin Johnson to that.
Yeah. So I would, it's a little bit rough, and I mean, I don't know. For me, when you said top 20, there's some top 20 hype about this guy that I haven't been out there looking for, where these guys are going.
It's absolutely there.
And I was thinking this guy is like a second round guy that can, develop on a team.
Oh no, he's going first round.
Yeah. That to me is surprising after watching the tape personally. Cause there's some things that he does well, but I don't think there's a full picture. Like he's not a full wide receiver that you can just go out there and he can be your number one guy right now. Could he develop into that? Sure. He's got some great tools. I mean, it's hard for a guy to be
that fast and that big.
That big, that fast.
Yeah.
He scored touchdowns. with the ball in his hands in the open field, he can do some things. He's never going to make anyone miss. He's not that type of person either. But he does have another gear that, Marvin Harrison doesn't in the open field. You know what I mean? He can make somebody miss and turn that into something by just outrunning guys to spots. But that's kind of the extent, I think, of his, yak.
Okay. I'm gonna flip it up a little bit here because
Flip it.
I think there's some really good upside to his game, and everything that you said, I agree with. I don't agree with everything that you said. Here's an interesting fact about Brian Thomas. He got an offer from LSU before he ever played varsity high school football. He went to a camp, and LSU offered him at that camp. Never played varsity football up to that point. He was focused on basketball. When he got the offer from LSU, he started to play more focused on football and really, like his senior year, stopped playing basketball and focused on football. He's only 21 years old, doesn't turn 22 till October. So his overall football, working on his football game, he's very young. And what I like about Brian Thomas is I agree with a lot of the stuff you're saying is I think the tools are there for if he gets in the right situation and for him to develop. Like you said, he's a little stiff. I don't agree with that. Like I really like the way he's able to sink his hips and get in and out of breaks. Like he doesn't do it well enough. Like that's one of his problems. Like he doesn't for his route running, he doesn't refine them all. He needs to sharpen up his breaks a little bit because they're a little unrefined.
Sloppy. Yeah.
So which then causes him trouble to get separation. Agreed. But for his size, and when you watch the tape, like he is able to do that. Like you can see, like he is able to do it. He just needs to work on it, like a lot. Like he needs to refine his game a lot. But there's a lot of tools there. He's extremely explosive. Like you said, getting off the line very well. Getting off the line, explosive that way. He could stop and start really fast, like really well. I thought that was really good. I thought he tracked the ball pretty well, too. On those deep balls, I thought he did that pretty good. I thought, you're right. His deep game is where he wins, and the bad part of his game is a short intermediate area. That's where he struggles. But like, that's really like where you see a refined receiver win, right? In those areas. And for me, when I watch him play, I don't see somebody who's like stiff and like I don't see like a Devin Funchess or something along those lines. Like I see somebody that has potential there, like that if he gets with a good coaching staff and they work on his game and he's actually can intake that knowledge, like there is potential for him to be a wide receiver one in this game because his athleticism shines on tape. He's got really good bursts. His separation, his ball contested catches aren't where you want him to be. There's a lot of things that you don't want that you want him to do better at.
Yeah,
but it's not like one of those. I don't watch him and say, "Oh, dude, he can't do that. Oh, he can't do that." It's like, "Oh, he needs to work." It's more like, "Oh, he needs to work on that. He needs to work on that. He really needs to sharpen up those routes. He really needs to learn how to like dig out of his breaks and sink those hips better and get in and out." And I think there's potential here for him to do just that.
And I'll give you a lot of credit on that because that is one thing that is hard for us to be able to know ahead of time is how much better can they get at the next level. And so I think that might be arguably the biggest difference between us. I'm evaluating on what I'm seeing right now. And, maybe he does take a big step forward in his development. And if so, that could really change things for him. It's just hard. It's hard to do that and trust it, knowing that there's some things that need cleaned up quite a bit in his game. Like that's difficult for me to do, but I'll give you credit in the fact that that's something that we don't often allow for enough of is for these guys to get better. And especially these younger players, if you're a 25-year-old receiver, you're not getting much better at that point.
If you're 23 and you're a senior, like, I'm way less optimistic. For a kid that's just 21 who hasn't been playing football all that long, like a Dalton Kincaid is another good example of that kind of player. Like, then I'm way more optimistic for that. Again, I have currently, just how the receivers are talking about the next 2 days, Brian Thomas is my wide receiver 5. We'll talk about Ladd McConkey. I have Ladd McConkey ahead of Brian Thomas.
I do as well.
And I have Brian Thomas where he is currently on his upside. And like I said, there's certain things I see that he can do that shows me like, okay, he could learn that. Doesn't mean he will learn it, but at least the opportunity is there for him to possibly do it.
For me, I see snippets of suddenness and burst out of breaks. It's not always there.
Yeah.
But I've seen it on occasion, and if he applies it to a full route tree, if he learns a full route tree, that's where I feel like he could become a good route runner. Right now, he's not. He's just not a route. He barely runs routes.
And I agree. So that's what we're saying. I agree with all that, but like I would say, like I just don't agree with the stiffness there. And I agree. Like I think, at least for him. And listen, I'm the first one to come out here and doo butter all over these guys. Like that's
doo butter.
A lot of people don't like to do that. I don't mind doing it. These are no longer kids. They're adults. They're graduating college. Like, take it like a man. If you don't want me to say it, then do better or go prove me wrong in the NFL. It's fine. It's not personal.
Yeah.
This is the game I play. You involve yourself in the game, just like Monopoly. Like, I'm gonna go ahead and take your rent. It's okay. Like, it's you know what I mean. So for me, Brian Thomas is just a guy that I could see.
He's just a guy.
Like, I see the upside.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think he's just a guy. Like, I like the potential there.
Yeah.
And where he goes and where he ends up, and like him go into a certain spot where he can get a lot of work and a lot of rapport with that quarterback, like you said in the first round. Like if this is a guy who goes to the Buffalo Bills, he's the number one receiver. Like him and Josh Allen match up pretty damn well. They can work out that intermediate stuff. He can learn that from Curtis Samuel and Khalil Shakir.
I would almost rather him go to a place though where he has someone else to take that pressure off of him.
Yeah, like the Bears.
Yeah.
The Bears.
Yeah, I mean, that would be great. So for what it's worth, I have a 73.5 on him, which is obviously much lower than Marvin Harrison, where I had it at 82. Just for some historical comps from my grades, two guys that are very close to him in score were Jordan Addison, Terrace Marshall, and Josh Downs. So
What do you think, Jared?
I agree with you, Rich, on, like, I see flashes. Like, there's sometimes where he pops. Like, I'm like, oh, like, the way he moved there, like, I could see him blossoming into, if he just does that, where he flashes on a more consistent basis, I can definitely see him for what the hype that he's been getting. Like, I think a lot of people are kind of, like, focusing on, like, a few key moments that I saw sometimes in his tape, but it just doesn't show up enough for me, where I think he's going to be a guy that may end up getting higher draft capital than I'm willing to spend in rookie drafts. Like, for right now, the way I'm looking at it, you know, obviously there's no draft capital right now to look at. Like, I'd probably take the top 4 running backs off the board before I would take Brian Thomas in rookie drafts. I just think he's a little more of a project, a good project, a lot to work with there. But specifically his releases were, for me, like, I thought he just didn't even do anything with his hands. A lot of time he just kind of kept them at a side, or he always did, like, the same shoulder dip move off the line of scrimmage. Like, it was the same thing kind of over and over again, where these guys are getting their hands on him and he's not really able to do anything with it. He body catches a little bit too much for me, but yeah, I mean,
what did you have for a score for him, and maybe Harrison too? Because I don't know if you said your score for Marvin Harrison.
Harrison was an 82 for me,
okay.
And then Thomas right now is a 71.6. So
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, it's a lot of doo on Thomas, and I'm a little bit more optimistic on him. But like, he could easily be Gabe Davis, like easily. Like that's he could very simple be a Gabe Davis, and that's what you
and
get.
that's kind of how I see him right
If he doesn't improve, that's what he is.
That's what he is. If he doesn't get better, he's Gabe Davis.
I mean, like, just thinking about how the draft shakes out right now for what we know on these prospects, like, where would you guys be willing to draft a guy like Brian Thomas, where you know he's going to have to develop a little bit more?
I mean, it depends where he goes in NFL draft. Like, it's going to, like, if he goes 18 to 25 to a team that he could be, like, pretty close to being the number one guy, like, that propels him up a little bit. You know, but, like, I don't know. Like, right now, he's already behind Ladd McConkey. He's already, in a Superflex league, he's already behind Brock Bowers. He's already behind other he's already behind 4 receivers for me.
What about, like, Jonathan Brooks?
Where do
those guys?
Those guys have
assuming they get day 2 capital.
yeah.
But you would think 2 of those guys are going to, of all of them, are going to
100%. Like, Trey Benson and Jonathan Brooks are probably going to get day 2 capital for sure. So, like, I would probably take the running backs ahead of them. Yeah.
And that's kind of where I'm at too. Like, I just can't, like, where he's pretty consistently going as the first pick after those top 8 guys in Superflex leagues, like, very often, I personally don't see myself taking him in the first round.
But I said the same thing on our Nerd Herd episode. I think it was either our Nerd Herd episode yesterday or whatever. I'm like, listen, there's all this talk about these receivers. I'm telling you right now, when the NFL draft is done, there will be 2 running backs going in the first round of the rookie drafts.
100%. There's always the need.
As high
always
as
pushes them up.
Yeah, as high as pick 7. is where it's going to go. Like the Cowboys are going to take one of these guys, and they're going to shut
And those
up.
guys are good enough.
And somebody's
where
going to take
I'd
him
be-
over, like
I'd be
these
good with taking
top
those
guys,
there.
like over J.J. McCarthy. Somebody will take him over Romo Dunze.
If Trey Benson goes to the Cowboys,
Yeah, like
I might be irresponsible.
but who would, like, right? But
Right,
that's
right.
a justifiable action. Like if he goes, we were talking about the Chargers. Like if one of those guys somehow goes to the Chargers, if you go to the Cowboys, and so like
Wild and crazy.
they're gonna go pretty high. They're gonna jump all those. They're gonna jump Lad McConkey for me. So you're talking like now. That's what we were saying yesterday. Like everybody's talking like, oh, 1-8, 1-8, like that's the end. No, it's not the end because these running backs at 9 are gonna be valuable. Currently, now with the Bills situation, guess what? 1-9 is way more valuable because whoever goes there is gonna get a huge bump in ADP. So it's this draft. We were said on the podcast, the Nerd podcast, like this. I've never been as excited for a draft for Dynasty because it's so deep with Dynasty prospects. It's not like any other draft I've ever seen. With like the first 3 days, the first 3 rounds, we're gonna see 30 Dynasty prospects.
Yeah.
That's unheard of, right? So like all these guys are getting good draft capital. I'm not gonna like all these guys tape, but some guys are gonna end up in really good situations at the same time. So it's really outside of like I feel very comfortable with the top 7 being the top 7 no matter what. But like we said, once that running back goes to Dallas, now it's like
Now he's entering that 7.
because I'll throw J.J. McCarthy in there
Yep.
too. Once he goes top 10, now we have a top 9. Like we have a top 9 that I feel really good about. And guess what? Wait till we start talking about Lad McConkey because I feel really damn good about that guy too. So
Matt, I'm surprised you didn't talk about Brian Thomas's effort. Sometimes I thought that popped a little bit. It was like,
there's a couple more receivers we got to talk about that have some effort issues.
Oh, don't worry. There'll be more, too. And there'll be more.
Yeah. I mean, Matt were talking beforehand, like there's a receiver that literally run his route and then just stop. And then
That's it.
that's it.
That's
So,
all, folks.